What's really going on with Trump's tariff policy? Well, before we start, may I just ask you for a small sign of support? Maybe by liking the video or supporting the channel. That would be great. Anyway, let's go back to the topic. At first glance, it might look like that all this fuss about tariffs is just another wave of economic nationalism. But to truly understand what's behind it, we need to look inside the Trump administration itself, because it turns out even there, not everyone agrees. There's not one single strategy. There are plenty, out of which we can point to two that are currently most prevalent. And while they may seem similar on the surface, their goals are completely different. Let's start with the first school of thought. This view sees tariffs not as a way to break global trade, but as a tool, a negotiating tool. As Scott Bessent, now US Treasury Secretary, explained in the past, tariffs are not the end game. They are the opening move, a way to push other countries to the negotiating table and reshape the rules of trade. The idea? Once a new deal is made, the US would lower tariffs again and remain open to global export, but under new terms. So what would these new terms look like? There are actually two main goals. First, to keep the US dollar as the world main reserve currency. And second, work with other countries to keep the dollar's exchange rate low, so US exports would stay competitive. So this vision isn't trying to destroy globalization. It's trying to reset it, of course, on American terms. The goal is a kind of Bretton Woods 2.0, a new international deal, but this time without trying to tie the dollar to the gold. And if it works, trade flows would bounce back with a more predictable system for managing currencies and trade balances. But then there is a second view, and this one is radically different. To understand it, we need to take off our economist glasses and think like a geopolitical strategist. Over the last 50 years, the US became the ultimate global buyer. That's what a hegemon actually does. It opens its market, buys from everyone, and in return, everyone becomes economically tied to it. But here there is a problem. By doing this, the US outsourced a massive chunk of its industrial base. And that's a big deal, not just economically, but strategically. Why is that? Let's rewind to World War II. At that time, the US managed to transform its industrial machine into a war engine almost overnight. Tanks, planes, ships, mass production turned the tide and got the US the ultimate war victory. Could it do that today? Probably not. Why? Because it doesn't have the industrial base anymore. That capacity moved overseas. And it didn't just go to friendly allies. It went straight to the main rival, China. So now it's a crisis. China has the ability to pivot military production, while the US not so much. From this perspective, tariffs aren't about short-term leverage. They are about changing the game radically. They are about slowing down globalization, rebuilding domestic industry, and making the US less dependent on foreign suppliers. Okay, this strategy is long-term, and it's not subtle. It advocates, like for example the economic advisor Peter Navarro or Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Well, they don't just want better trade deals. They want fewer imports, period. They want to reindustrialize America, even if it comes at a cost. And yes, that's a pretty radical departure from traditional US policy. Naturally, this has sparked a war of ideas inside the Trump camp. The divide is so deep that even Elon Musk took a jab, calling Navarro dumber than a sack of bricks. So it's not just a fight over tactics, it's a clash of worldviews between global negotiators and nationalist industrialists. Now, here's the big question. Can this vision actually work? To reindustrialize, you need workers, lots of them. Back when industrialization first took off, a huge portion of the population was available to fill factories. But today, as of March 2025, the US unemployment rate is just 4.2%. There simply isn't a massive idle workforce ready to jump into the assembly line. So, what would companies need to do? Well, they'd have to pull workers away from other sectors with big incentives. In other words, with higher wages. But higher wages mean higher production costs. Here's a concrete example. According to Dan Ives, global tech analyst at Wedbush Securities, if Apple produced the iPhone in the US, it would cost around $3,500, or roughly 3,000 euros. And that's just one product. Even products assembled in the US today often rely on global components. So, total independence, very hard to achieve. And then there's the elephant in the room, immigration. Historically, industrial growth was fueled by new labor coming from abroad. But if Trump follows through with his promise to limit immigration, there simply will not be workers coming from other countries. So it's hard to imagine a massive shift back to factory jobs in today's economy. So only high-value production might come back, which can sustain higher wages, and the rest likely to stay where it is, or maybe just move to countries with lower tariffs to the US, like Mexico, for example. But even that would come at a cost. US consumers would face higher prices, inflation would rise, and to contain it, interest rates might spike again. Well, that's a recipe for stagflation, a toxic mix of inflation and slow growth. And this is where the radicals' plan might just hit a wall. Not because it's unpopular with voters, though it might become so, but because other voices in the administration and business world won't stand for it. And don't forget, midterms are just over a year away. If the economy suffers, Democrats, currently sidelines, might find a way back to power in Congress. So, what will happen? What can we make out of it? Will the radical tariff hawks win and push America into a new era of economic nationalism? Or will the pragmatists steer things back to the negotiating table? Should other countries retaliate or wait and see? What is your take? Will Trump go all the way or pull back at the last moment? Let me know in the comments. See you next time.